Sanctions have been imposed on 82 individuals and 29 companies. German payment provider Wirecard went bankrupt on Tuesday.
Russia has launched an unprecedented disinformation campaign against...
Billions of dollars have been found in various offshore accounts.
Welcome to Integrity Insights, the Berlin Risk Podcast. Hello everybody, welcome to the latest edition of our podcast. Today we have a very special guest and someone that we have been meaning to invite for a long time. He's one of the most recognized voices in the open source intelligence space, Nico Dekens, also known as the Dutch OSINT guy. He's an expert in open source intelligence and online human intelligence with over 30 years of experience in the field. He spent over 20 years with the Dutch police and currently serves as Senior Vice President of Engineering at ShadowDragon. It has been a real treat for me personally to talk to Nico, and I hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did. All right, Nico, welcome on the podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's an honor.
The honor is mine. I don't want to get too much into detail regarding your biography because there's really plenty of material that everyone can find online, but we need to start somewhere. So could you maybe just give us a very brief version of your, professional trajectory?
Yep. Yeah, of course. So I worked just under 25 years for the Dutch government doing OSINT in intelligence and human operations. Mostly online when it comes to open source intelligence, so it always had an online component. Then I moved over to Bellingcat for a very short period of time, and now currently I'm the SVP of Engineering and Chief Innovator at a company called ShadowDragon.
And at ShadowDragon, is it because I know this is a US-based company, but I guess you have operations all over the world. Is it a full-time position, or what is your?
Yeah, it's a full-time position. So basically, I work with the CTO to steer the development team and enable all of our users all over the world in giving them what we call a SaaS OSINT solution. So basically, a scalable OSINT solution platform.
Mm-hmm. And you work remotely from.
Yep.
From Europe.
Yeah, so I work from the Netherlands. That's my home base, but typically I'm somewhere around the world every month. Depends on where they want to have me. I just came back from Washington and was in Japan earlier, so I travel a lot.
Oh wow! And I saw on your LinkedIn that you have there after you left the police since 2019, you have this company Dutch OSINT Guy Intelligence Services. What does that company do exactly?
So it started as a consulting, one-man consulting company. So what I do typically, I go in companies and floor walk and see how they can implement open source intelligence, train them, lecture them, strategical planning, but always with, let's say, the OSINT/human intelligence component. That's my consultant part. But nowadays, with my very busy day job, it's mostly giving talks, keynotes, and presentations from my company, Dutch OSINT Guy.
So you basically develop tools. You give lectures. You teach. You do OSINT yourself. What do you enjoy the most?
I still enjoy the most doing an investigation. That's just old habits. I just like to dig. I just like to piece together puzzles. So. I just sometimes read the news or find something in my timeline like, hey, this might be an interesting use case. And most of the times all you have is a first name and last name or a location, and that's your starting point. And if all goes well, you find a lot, and then either I never disclose those use cases publicly. I always share them with the according authorities if there's something that's really sensitive or that they need to know. Because the fact that you can find things publicly for me at least, doesn't mean that you should always then share that information or at least the analysis publicly.
This is actually a perfect segue. What you just said, that you started investigation with just a name, because this was exactly my next question. I was wondering, because I would really like to get more practical, since, I'm talking to one of the best known OSINT investigators. I was wondering, practically, how do you start an OSINT investigation? If you have just, let's say, a name, how would you start? And has that changed radically over the last, let's say, I don't know, 5, 6, 7, 8 years?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, so there's to answer the change, yes, definitely. There's definitely a lot of change, especially since all the AIs and machine learnings and LLMs of this world started popping in. It has its advantages, but it also has its downsides, because I think when you now do a typical search engine search, so think of Google, Bing, or Yandex, they first give you AI tailored results, which for me very often are the less reliable results because they are summarized. So I like to do it the old school way. So just get back. Let's just say recently I read a news article that in Germany they arrested 2 Russian nationals that were living in Berlin that were arrested on suspicion of spying for the Russian government. So in the news articles, there was just one profile picture shared. So I had a face and I had a first and last name. That was just mentioned publicly in the news. So that's my starting point. But then my goal is to come up with a research question. What do I really want to know? Because of course I can start looking up everything, but my goal was, can I prove, first of all, can I find this exact same person based upon that profile picture? So to build at least confidence for myself that I'm dealing with the right person. And then my next question is, can I find information that connects them to Russia or Russian intelligence, or let's say spying orientated connections, businesses. So in this case, there were a lot of businesses connected to them. And when you looked at those businesses, you could see other people that were working in the company that were clearly Russian nationals. Some were even sanctioned on known sanctioned lists. So again, you pivot off those. And yeah, by the end of the day, I could at least confirm what the news article stated. Yes, this is someone that has been living in and around Berlin for a long period of time, have set up businesses. All these businesses are untransparent and have always connections to Russia. And when most of those connections I can, with high confidence, label as people that have connections to Russian intelligence services, or at least the Russian government. And then the next step for me always is where it's really getting interesting. Can I find unknowns that were not identified in the news? So can I find new individuals that may help me reach out to German BKA or German police and say, hey, did you know, this is what I was able to find with my techniques and tools. Did you know about this person, or did you know about that information? So that's one of the recent use case examples, but it literally starts with a name. And the hard part always is a name can be spelled in so many ways. So if you look at my name, Nico Dekens, it could be just Nico-Dekens, Nico.Dekens, Nico_Dekens, last name, first name, translated into Chinese, Cyrillic, Arabic, because I don't know how someone or someone else put their name online. And then, of course, start guessing most common email providers. So if these were German and Russian related people, you could think of all the major Russian internet service providers as well as German internet providers, and then combine all those names with emails. Well, and in the end, after a couple of hours, you at least have a lot of information, and that's not OSINT for me. That's just finding information. Then the next step is making sense of all the information that I've now collected. What is noise? What is actionable? What is new information? What allows me to pivot and dig deeper? So that's basically how I approach it. That's a very short, condensed version of how I approach it.
A lot of things come into my mind as you speak. One interesting thing, what you said about names being written in different ways. I remember you wrote recently an article on this about Amsterdam, right? About the Dutch capital and how it can be spelled in so many different names, and how this is a challenge for OSINT investigators. But I was also wondering, when you said in this particular case you have a name and you found a photo, how do you work with like this type of data with photo? Do you, for instance, rely on some facial recognition tools?
Yeah, so I use facial recognition tools that are commercially available. So in the OSINT world, there are a few ones that are out there that are pretty well known. So you have PimEyes, you have Lenso.ai, and those are, let's say, commercially available for an individual. And of course, there are also facial recognition tools that are mostly used by government, but I sadly don't have access to them. But yes, and of course, just traditional reverse image searching in Google, Bing, Yandex, DuckDuckGo, all the search engines. And nowadays, AI is getting better with recognizing faces, or at least telling you where that same image or a similar looking image might exist somewhere on the internet, but it's still not where I want it to be. So mostly commercially available facial recognition tools.
Mm-hmm. And are there any tools, generally speaking, not just facial recognition, but in general, that you rely the most, these days, like most recently?
So specifically for facial recognition?
Or no, I mean in
Yeah.
general, like for your research.
Well, of course, the company that I work for, ShadowDragon, so I basically don't need anything else because we cover almost all sources that are out there. But other than that, I use a lot of breach data information or steal log information. We can have a debate on if that's open source intelligence. But again, I'm very strict on that. I will only use breached and leaked data if it's really publicly available. So I like to call it low-hanging fruit breaches. Someone else should be able to find them by doing just a search engine search. Now the hard part is always, if you download 8 gigabytes of data, how do I process and parse that and to find what I need to find? But that helps me pivot a lot. So that's what I use very often. I'm still pretty old school when it comes to that. I don't use that many, let's say, commercial OSINT tools because, they have a price tag, and I'm Dutch, and the Dutch are known to be cheap.
That's true. I had a lot of or a couple of Dutch roommates throughout my life, and that's actually accurate. It's an interesting it's an interesting thing. But you mentioned the breach data and how you only rely on those if they are in fact publicly available, anyone can access them. Because this is a very controversial topic. I have recently read a Guardian investigation. I don't know if you saw that one. They did an investigation into Assad, like Bashar al-Assad and his life in Moscow, and they used data from. And I think Bellingcat does that as well. They use data that they, I suppose, buy on Telegram, like this flight, about flight records. And they, Guardian used that to track basically the movement of the children of Bashar al-Assad. And so if I understood you correctly, you would not go to this length. You would not buy.
No, my ethical standards are slightly different. I will never pay for stolen data, period. That's just something that I will never do. So I will only use data that's easy to find for anyone that just has an internet connection. I know the information is out there, and it does not mean that let's say someone hires me, that I sometimes know that the data might be there. And I tell them, hey, there is data out there. You need to talk to your legal department. We could collect it and do something with it, but we need to make sure that legally we have the right backup to do this. Because, yes, I do acknowledge there are certain channels or groups or places on the internet in the deep dark web where you can buy data. But again, I'm not a huge fan of that.
Yeah, I mean, that's always a question, like where you draw the line between legitimate OSINT and creepy behavior or violation of privacy.
And I think it also depends on the use case. You can only imagine if I need to research someone that stole a bike versus someone that's planning a terrorist attack. I'm like, that's a different game. So it really depends on how serious or how urgent a use case is, where you sometimes just need to maybe cross certain ethical boundaries, but only again with the legal backup. I just want to play this by the rules at all costs. That's my biggest goal when I do investigations or when people hire me.
Yeah. Another question I wanted to ask you about regarding your approach, because this is something I've been thinking of recently a lot, is where do you kind of end your investigation? Do you ever feel comfortable saying that you have investigated everything and there's no information on this individual or this entity. You have seen it all. Do you ever feel like comfortable in saying that? Because I feel like there's so much data these days that it's just difficult to know like where to actually conclude the investigation.
Yeah, I like that question a lot. And this is something that I teach classes, 2 6-day classes. That's what I hammer on with my students all the time. Where do you stop? When do you stop? And I think that all comes down to if you're able to define an answerable research question, you should know where to stop. Because if I need to know, and I always make this analogy, where were you last Wednesday? That's a very constrained research question. So I could probably spend weeks looking into your entire life and find things from 3 years ago and whatever, or even plans for the upcoming weeks. But that's not my research question. My research question is, where were you on that specific date and time? So that's narrowing down. And with that, you probably know your first step would be, let's see where this guy is online. Can I find it? If I can find it, then I can narrow it down to that time frame. If I cannot find it, not finding an answer is still an answer. I've had many cases where I've had very, let's say, large criminals at large that just had very good operation security, and they had little to no online footprint. But that by itself is also a deliverable, an answerable. Like, hey, you asked me to find this individual because you wanna arrest him, but this individual is not online. So that could potentially mean that they take great pride and effort in hiding themselves online. So I hope that answers your question, but for me it all comes down, and that's what I'm seeing currently, and that's what we started off this discussion with. The landscape has shifted for me the past 5 years, where people just want to grab everything about anyone. And I'm like, then it's just information. I always want to, the int in OSINT means intelligence, which means that you need to define a research question, come up with a research plan, define your sources, collect information, process and analyze that information, and then turn that into an answerable deliverable. So someone always comes to you with a question. Find me anything about everything about anything is something that I will simply say, can't do it. I cannot download the entire internet for you. That's impossible.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And I mean, you already mentioned this is a huge topic. We cannot ignore artificial intelligence. What I wanted to ask you, I'm a bit younger than you. I have been, doing this for, 8, 9, 10 years. And for me, or like in general, being in my professional life, and for me, this is so far the biggest game changer that I have experienced in terms of, everything changing so quickly. Is it the same for you, or was, like the internet, even bigger in your early days?
This is definitely for me in my entire career. So I've been doing this for over 30 years now. So yes, I'm that old. So that especially the AI is the most significant change because everybody jumps on the hype wagon for me. OSINT or intelligence gathering has always equaled change for me. In the good old days, for example, a platform like Facebook was very easy to find information. Then they shut down certain capabilities, and basically you're back to the drawing board. I think what now really has become more useful is that I learned programming. I learned how to program Python and other things. Nowadays, with AI, people don't need to know how to code anymore. They can just ask an AI, hey, I have an idea for a tool, and as long as you can articulate your prompt well enough, the AI will bring you the code. Now, the hard part is, can you trust the code? Because I also know that AI does a very bad job at coding something, or may add in lines of code that communicates to a super secret server somewhere else that makes you highly uncomfortable. But it does mean that where 10 years ago, if I had, let's say, 10 million pieces of data, I had to come up with how to process and analyze that data myself. Nowadays, I can most likely throw most of that data in a local running AI, on my local machine. So I don't prefer to use online AIs. I want to be in control. So I download models. I have very special graphics cards and computers. I want to be in control. So I can now easily say, hey, here's 10 million lines. I only want to see this piece of information. Carve out that. Create a dashboard for this. So that's something that has become definitely easier. But still, it always requires the human in the loop to validate that information. So that's what I think is the biggest change. And maybe you notice as well, in certain cases it makes life easier, but in other cases I spent literally more time prompting than if I go back to a traditional way of doing it. I could have probably found my answer in half an hour instead of spending 1.5 hours finding the right prompt to get the right answer.
Yeah, that definitely happens. I mean, I would really invite everyone to read your articles on the subject on the Dutch OSINT guy website. You have written most recently an article titled "The Slow Collapse of." No, this one is a bit older, right? The slow collapse of critical thinking in AI. The most recent one is OSINT is still a thinking game. So anyone can read those. But could you maybe just kind of briefly summarize your position?
Yeah. So I think people are forgetting about the tradecraft. It all comes down to critical thinking. And for me, it's always about the 5 W1H questions, which means the who, what, when, where, why, with what, with whom, how. And AI is not capable of reading between the lines and interpreting what you want to see. It's great at showing what it can see in the data, but it doesn't understand the context of the data, and it doesn't understand the context in a research use case. Even if you give it a prompt with guardrails and telling it, hey, this is my goal, this is what I've collected, even then it's not good at it. So this is why I'm a little bit worried on the newer generation, but also my generation, let's say the old school OSINT folks, that we rely a little bit too much on algorithms and AI, where we forget that we have our own mind and that we should always challenge the outcome of any tool. So it could be AI, but it could also be a commercial tool. You should always, let's say, try to validate that. Try to challenge the outcome. How certain can we be? Can we find alternative routes or ways into this information to create more certainty in my report, for example? So that's definitely what I see. And I think it also, the risk is that the younger generation, for me, feels sometimes like that they are button operators. You give them a tool, you give them a button, and it's almost like they're looking for a tool that says, find me the criminal or find me the suspect. I would never want to use a tool that does that. An algorithm that, it's great that it can do, let's say, the first triage, but there should always be a human in the loop in every step to validate any outcome out of any algorithm. Like my own CTO, Jason, always said, AI and ML is just fancy math. That's it. Nothing more. And math can break, and math will make mistakes. So you need to make sure that you double check, triple check everything.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, it's still omnipresent, and I was wondering how do you see the future of tools like ShadowDragon? Can you foresee a world where those tools are absorbed in some agentic AI systems?
Yeah, to some extent. So currently we are literally on our roadmap. We have more analytical layers, what I like to call them, and assistants, because we do see a new breed of investigators. They're barely trained on open source intelligence, which also worries me. I think companies should train their people before they give them powerful tools in, let's say, the fundamentals of intelligence gathering and open source intelligence. But we're going to build in tools that will assist the user in ensuring that they get the most out of the tool, that it points out things they forgot or should at least pay attention to. And we need to deliver quicker insight, because people are also becoming more and more impatient. People don't want to wait. Even waiting 30 seconds for a result nowadays for a lot of people is too long, which means that we need to speed up things and then tell them basically in one picture. Well, it's just like we're doing a podcast now. It was easy to do a 3-hour podcast 3 years ago. Nowadays, the attention span of most people is this short. And the same counts for using software. So the software needs to be catered more to impatient, but also unexperienced users. And that's literally what we're building. We're trying to build more what I like to call ease of use in there.
And I was also wondering, in terms of using AI for the different parts of the intelligence process, like collection, extraction, analysis. Do you feel more comfortable using AI for one aspect rather than another?
Yeah, I think AI works best with large volumes of data. So if I need to, maybe a good use cases. Recently in the Netherlands, we had the the NATO summit, which basically meant all the world leaders came to the country, and you can only imagine that the Dutch government had a reason to understand if there were violent protests or other forms of violence being announced. That means that you cannot look at individuals because that's from a legal perspective and no go. But you can look at messages from social media or the internet where people announce that they're going to riot or set things on fire or going to attack people. Because that means that maybe the riot police should be positioned in a certain location knowing that a large group of people will be coming there. And this is where I think monitoring comes in on top with analytical layers. So it should be able to extract locations, it should be able to extract threat indicators, so keywords, and that's hard because most people who announce violence will not literally say, hey, I'm going to shoot you, or hey, I'm going to set this on fire. No, they're probably going to say, we need to gather here and here, it's going to get spicy. Something like that. Or let's make a fist together, or let's make sure that we let them know that we are serious. So being able to interpret those nuances in language, this is where I think, I know because I've experimented this a lot, AI, but typically machine learning, is pretty good in understanding a narrative of a large volume of group. So I'm not interested in finding that one person that's just angry with the world. There are too many of there. I just want to know how can we keep a certain area as safe as possible during a certain event.
So that would not be just the collection, but also analysis.
Yes. So it's parsing the data. So first step is collect the data based on keywords and indicators. And then analyze that information for meaning. And for me, that's triage, because the next step is the dashboard will present you, hey, these are 5 announcements, these are people that replied to it, this is the overall narrative, and then I want to humanly validate the accuracy of it. And then maybe pivot into them and say, hey, is this a group that's well organized? Are they financed? Do they have backup? We've seen that also a lot during the Hamas-Palestine protests all over the world, where we could literally see that some of these protests were clearly financed and influenced by others, where the pure goal was violence. I'm all for democracy and I'm all for free speech. But when it comes to people deliberately joining protests with their only goal is to be violent, in any way, shape, or form, I think that's where the tipping point comes in. And this is where I think open source intelligence can and is super useful if you use that with the right collection methods and then analytical layers on top of that.
And you also mentioned the human element. Do you have the impression that in this day and age, with again the growing amount of content data, that the human is becoming more important?
Yes, certainly. We've seen a lot of social media platforms closing down or locking down. So the only way to really get access is to have accounts on those platforms. But also sometimes when you look at, for example, Telegram groups, where a lot of nation-state actors are active, or maybe hacking groups are active. Sometimes just asking a general question. Hey, what are the plans for the weekend? Or, hey, what's up next, guys? that's a form of human, or at least elicitation, that sometimes could give you just that little lead or pivot point that can take you into the next step of your investigation. Is that OSINT? I'm not sure. But I do think that is the evolution of OSINT, especially in the phase that we are in. The internet is simply becoming more locked down and decentralized. So for certain edge use cases, you need to interact, or at least you need to ask questions. And that's something that you can do openly or covertly, depending on the use case.
I suppose you just need to make sure you have a really good operation security when you engage.
Yes, and that's the hardest part, because you do want to interact, but you do not want to let others know that you are you with a specific interest. And operation security on the internet, there's no such thing as 100% a waterproof OPSEC. Because your computer will have to communicate with the internet. So no matter what, you're sending out information to the internet. But you can certainly try to lock down things to your best of your ability. So obfuscate your IP address, obfuscate your computer fingerprint, your username, your everything, your time zones, your language settings. There's so much that you can do when it comes to hiding yourself and your mission from others online.
One big question: where do you see this whole field? Because it's still, I don't know if it's still, but it was always kind of relatively obscure field, kind of emanating from intelligence services to slowly creeping into the corporate world. But it's still relatively, I guess, niche. But it's becoming, I feel like it's becoming a bit bigger. Like, where do you see the future of OSINT and its future applications?
Good question. I think since last year, for me, it really felt like OSINT has become mainstream. So even my neighbor now knows, and my mom knows what OSINT is, or at least what publicly available information is and what that means to find the information. I also see that there are a lot of more companies popping up, like ShadowDragon. That's something, because 10 years ago, there were basically 3 companies, us and 2 others. Now there's dozens. And you also see acquisitions of companies where large companies buy OSINT companies like ShadowDragon, or recently there were some others from Australia bought. So there's definitely a market interest as well, where OSINT has become I think more like a commercial commodity, if that's the right way to say it. There's definitely market interest. And just like you said, it used to be a government-only thing, but the past 3-4 years, the finance world, due diligence, marketing in general, there are so many, it's no longer limited to government. Everybody, or most companies nowadays, have seen the light when it comes to open source intelligence, which makes me very happy, because I've been advocating for OSINT for quite some while now. So it really makes me happy that it's finally resonating with a broad audience.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're the OG of the OSINT world, which leads me to my next, and let's make it the last question, because you mentioned earlier that you've been doing this for 30 years. Which is a long time, and as we discussed, this field is just enormously quickly changing. I really wonder, how do you make sure to stay up to date?
Yeah, good question. So this is why I network a lot. So on my LinkedIn, on my X, or still like to call it Twitter, Blue Sky. So basically, I have accounts on all the socials, but I attend all conferences, workshops, read blogs. So I spend a lot of time catching up, and typically my Friday is what I like to call my nerd day, which stands for never ending research and development. So that's where I just try and keep on top of the game. But I must admit, it has become harder, because just like we just said, 10 years ago, there were only, let's say, a small group of people, but now we have thousands of people talking about OSINT. So for me now, it's more about filtering the actual valuable new information that I want to know about and learn about. But for me, OSINT is always equals learning. So I learn something new every day. It could be a GitHub repository, it could be a blog by someone else, it could be a podcast like yours. That's what I encourage people to do. Reach out, join Discord communities, join Slack groups, join other OSINT groups. There are many out there, just to build a network and get to know people.
That's a great advice. Well, thank you so much, Nico, for your time. This has been an actual privilege talking to you. I really appreciate it. You took the time, and I wish you all the best in all your roles.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me.